Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm really excited because I've got a friend of mine, Andy Bell, on the show, and I'm excited to kind of shine some light on Andy's story. There's so many fascinating things about it. So, Andy, welcome and thanks so much for joining
Thanks.
us.
I appreciate it. It's good to be with you, Scott. Always good to see
Yeah,
you.
likewise, likewise. So,
Yeah.
let's maybe start with just a brief kind of story of your connection to diabetes and when you were diagnosed, that type of thing.
Okay. Um, I was 14. It was 1994, so way back in the day.
Yeah,
um, and uh, lost a lot of weight. I was already kind of a slim kid, so I didn't have a lot of weight to lose. Um, my parents, like a lot of other parents, probably with kids who were showing the symptoms around that time, around that age, adolescence, kinda chalked up what I was experiencing to just that change, going through
yeah,
puberty. Um, and so what would have normally tipped my parents off for my symptoms as something, maybe being off, they just um, kinda dismissed it for a little while, and my mom's always felt terrible about that because,
mm,
she felt like she missed an opportunity to get me help sooner, but, we only knew what we knew. So,
right.
um, I remember I was on a golf course with one of my best friends and, me and him and his dad, and, I had that unquenchable thirst, and
Yeah.
I remember telling them, I was so thirsty. It was like a summer day. I'm like, there was a there was a par 3 or a hole that had like a green, like a pond with like, it looked green because it was on the golf course. It had a lot of
Yeah.
chemicals. And I told them, I said, I was so thirsty. I said, I'm gonna drink from that pond. And my buddy and his dad were like, are are you crazy? Yes. But you were like around 5, so you made, I don't, do you
Right.
remember?
I don't
You remember
remember
how?
much about it,
Yeah,
no, but yeah.
yeah. So I was so thirsty, and they, obviously they were like, well, that's not right. So anyway,
I
yeah,
just
I go
got
ahead.
this picture of you, just, like, face down in this
Slurping
pond
from
full
the
of
pond.
algae.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Dude,
it
that's
was.
crazy.
Yeah, it was, everybody's got kind of uh, their diagnosis story is kind of, um, everybody kind of had their own share of kind of wild symptoms.
Yeah.
And then, my mom, well, and then finally the last straw kind of was I was watching TV and I remember saying, I can't see the picture on the TV.
Mhm.
Because my blood sugar was so high, my eyes were starting to,
Yep.
um, feel it, and so I said something to my mom, and she was like, "Okay, this is not growing pains. This is not normal." So
Right.
we called my pediatrician, and she feels bad about this, but again, we couldn't do it. We did the best we could, but she called my pediatrician, and it was like a Thursday or Friday, and they couldn't get us in for a couple days, so we had to wait through the weekend. Um, and then he did uh, tested my blood sugar, tested my urine, and, he came back and he said, "I'm confident that Andy has type 1 diabetes. You need to go to the hospital right now."
Yeah.
And so it was all kind of it all happened very quickly, and, and, yeah, it was kind of a shocking experience to be 14 and to, you know, now
Yeah.
you're going to the hospital for this thing you know nothing about. Um,
Yeah.
and we actually, my pediatrician's office was in my neighborhood, kind of near my neighborhood. And we asked, um, if I had time to go home and pack a bag, and he
Mhm.
and he was kind of hesitant to even allow us to do that because
Wow.
he knew that this situation was pretty dire. So got to the hospital, of course. They said, I don't remember exactly since it's been almost 30 years, but I wanna say they estimated my sugar to be 800, 900, something like that, you know?
Oh, yeah.
So they were really surprised that I walked in, that I wasn't in a coma or something,
Yeah.
but, spent the next
And did
couple weeks
you
there.
did you have to stay in the hospital? I mean, one of the things I
Yeah.
remember about my diagnosis was, a kind of an extended stay at that time in the
Mhm.
hospital.
Yeah.
I think that still happens to some cases now, but,
Yeah.
that's quite the norm. What do you remember about that?
Yeah, it was I wanna say it was 2 weeks and,
Mhm.
a week or 2, but, um, it was overwhelming. It was like
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, you
and
totally
yeah. Back in '94, I'll never forget also when we got to the emergency room, one of the nurses just kind of casually said, "Oh, well, you're not gonna be able to have candy anymore." So all of a sudden, it's like, I'm in
oh,
the hospital, I don't so, you know, it's, in hindsight, I can laugh at that, but, it was all kinda hit me at once, and it was like, "Wait a minute,
totally.
what? Like, candy? And then are you gonna have to take injections?" And it was a ton to process at age
Mhm,
14,
mhm.
but thankfully, I had an incredibly supportive, uh, support system. My
Yeah,
parents, my
yeah.
family, my friends made all the difference.
Yeah, it's really something. I mean, especially with type 1 diabetes where it's, you have that diagnosis, you go into the hospital, and it's like the world comes crashing down around you because
Yeah,
everything changes and it's life or death,
absolutely.
you have to
Yeah,
learn so
yeah,
much in such a short period of time. It's
yeah.
scary.
In hindsight, Scott, I wish I would've sought, like, speaking with someone like a professional just to help me process it. Like, in the
Mhm,
hospital, the University of Missouri was great. Don't get me wrong, they had an incredible program there. My pediatrician was, like, honestly, I wanna say world renowned. David Goldstein,
mhm.
he was amazing, University of Missouri. Um, and so they had somebody there, like, I don't know, maybe a social worker or somebody in place that helped me kind of process some of those thoughts and feelings.
Yeah,
But like, you know, if you're listening to this and you're newly diagnosed and especially if you're a teenager, if you have the means to do it, I highly recommend you go speak with a professional just to help you cope with everything that's been kind of thrust upon you. You have a large responsibility that is placed squarely on your shoulders. And
yeah,
at the end of the day, even if you have a supportive family, supportive friends, supportive network, it still is up to you to, make those decisions about what you're gonna eat and,
yeah, yeah. It's a lot of
so
pressure. It's a lot of pressure to
yeah,
deal with. Well, I
yes, it
I
was.
agree with that, and I'm a fan of kind of exploring some of the mental health aspects of living with
Mhm.
that because the way I see it is if I don't have my head on straight, I can't
Right.
the things I need to do to take good care.
100%.
And if you're, especially at that age, you're going through so many just transitions in life, even without
Yes.
diabetes, it's a
Yeah.
difficult time. So
Yeah. I remember returning to school, 14, and you go back and you immediately wanna try to fit in, or at least I did. I was
yeah,
trying to
totally.
fit in, trying to, try to find your place in your school, but yet behind the scenes, I was, processing this brand new thing that I knew nothing about, and people were asking me questions, and it was a wild time. And nowadays, like, y you know, back in '94, it sounds so funny to say that, but, like, there wasn't cell phones, there wasn't social
Right.
networks, so I didn't have the I knew of one other person in my school. Um, and, so, it's times are a little different now, but it's still incredibly important to get some support and,
Mhm.
uh, so, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So fast forwarding a bunch of years, when we
Mhm.
met, I met you
Yeah.
at a children with diabetes conference, and
Yes.
and despite the name, it's great for children with diabetes, but it's
Yep.
also a fantastic resource for adults living with diabetes. There's
Yep.
a terrific adults track, and there's tracks for parents and grandparents and siblings and all that stuff.
Yep.
So a
Yep.
terrific conference.
Yep.
You
That was
were
awesome. Yep.
working for JDRF at the
Yep.
time.
That's right. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about that. You getting involved in kind of that
Yeah.
advocacy and
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. A long time ago, so before I got involved with JDRF, I was a personal trainer, and, um, I was I think I found Carrie's blog, and immediately I was like, "Oh, that's awesome, like, maybe I can share some of my experience because I've always been really big on fitness and health,
Mhm.
and so I reached out to Carrie, and I started, blogging. I was a terrible writer, by the way, so thank goodness you can't find those blogs anymore. Um, but I started to get more involved, and, I there's a camp here in our town called Camp Hickory Hill. I started to be involved with them, um, and through the camp, I met somebody who was, um, kind of spearheading the outreach efforts for JDRF,
Yeah.
and she knew that I was looking to get out of personal training. Long story short, I ended up getting a job with JDRF, and, um, at JDRF, I had the opportunity to go to some of these conferences, and, that was awesome because I could connect with people, and that's where we met, like you said, I think it was Orlando, and that was a lot of fun. Yeah, we played basketball and get to meet you and Carrie in person. You guys were like the larger than life, diabetes, celebrities. But yeah,
Crazy internet
yeah,
people. Yeah.
that was a great conference, and I went there a couple years and got to, connect with people in person and hear from different professionals and, um, you
Did
know
it was it challenging to both live with diabetes and work in diabetes, or did that kind of fill your cup at the same time?
uh, I was super excited to get the opportunity to work for JDRF, like, because I wanted to connect with people. I wanted to, um, reach out to let people know, like, I know what you're going through.
Yeah.
Um, and so I really no, that was, I really loved I worked for JDR for 6 years. I worked for JDR. I've worked my first 3 years was in their outreach department and that was a home-based opportunity, which was unique.
Yeah,
And
especially at that
so
time when there wasn't all the
yeah,
big remote
I
working and stuff like that. Mhm.
yeah, I'm in Central Missouri, and so initially they were gonna put me in maybe the St. Louis or Kansas City JDRF, but that didn't work out, um and so I was doing a lot of my job from home, and then an opportunity came, in at headquarters in New York City, working in communications, and so I took that opportunity, and I just, JDRF has raised a lot of money, and they're a fundraising organization, and I was trying to do my part to, um, connect newly diagnosed people to other families, to other, people that knew what we were going through, um, and so I really enjoyed that opportunity, and, ultimately, actually, I got laid off twice from JDRF, in '08, there was kind of a hard economical times, and I was low on the totem pole, so, they kicked a bunch of people from national, and it was pretty devastating, um, but, life goes on.
Yeah.
Um, and long story short, when I went back to JDRF, did work 3 more years, and then they had a new management, marketing, communications kind of merge, and they got rid of a bunch of other people, so I got laid off and, ended up coming back home to Missouri, and, that's when I, um, learned about, local law enforcement academy here and, started my career in law enforcement.
Yeah, yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. Actually, before we get into that, tell
Yeah.
me about when did jujitsu enter the picture? Was that before you
Oh,
trained
man, yeah.
law enforcement or after?
So, yeah, jujitsu was before law enforcement. I got started in jiu-jitsu. So I train at a Gracie gym here in Columbia. My one of my longtime friends, Sean
I could
Woods,
see
runs a school
you've
here.
got your, what do they call it? The gi or the
Yeah, I
see
just
the
actually
yeah,
came from practice. I
I love
just
it.
came from
That's
practice.
awesome.
Sean and I started around '03. So it's been pretty consistent for 20 years or so. Um, and jujitsu, so I'm a black belt professor, I guess technically. Um, and Jujitsu has been like a really good outlet for me, Scott. Like I know you've always been a big basketball player,
Yeah.
and like you've found a lot of like joy
Mhm.
in playing basketball.
Yeah.
And so that's what jujitsu has been for me. It's been a really good outlet for me to like channel the challenges that come with managing type 1 diabetes. I have
Yeah.
additional autoimmune illnesses. It's become the perfect outlet for me to channel just some of the hardships that come with life. And so yeah, it's been really good. And it's been very helpful in my law enforcement career too.
Yeah,
So
I can only imagine.
yeah.
With the jujitsu and diabetes,
Hmm.
are there things that I mean, with any physical activity, we're always kind of balancing our blood sugars and things like
Right.
that. But what
Yeah.
about, I don't know, do you wear a pump? Are you doing shots? Are you thinking about that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
It,
So I'm
it
pretty stubborn. I'm a pretty stubborn person. So I always, for many, many years, um, I steered away from the pump. A
Mhm,
lot of that was because of jujitsu, because I was
mhm,
afraid to have anything attached to me.
sure.
So it wasn't until this is 24 now. It wasn't until probably 2020, maybe 2021 that I first started to wear a CGM.
Mhm,
Um, I've always had pretty good, my endocrinologists have always said I've had pretty good management of my diabetes with multiple daily injections and finger sticks.
yep.
Um, you know, that took a lot of hard work, but finally got into a CGM 2 or 3 years ago, and much to my surprise, it hasn't been an issue. I It's been knocked off a few times,
Mhm,
just in training, but um, so I use the CGM. I don't use a pump. I've still never pumped. It's something that I'm giving more consideration to now. I'm a father, um, and it's maybe more of an automated system
mhm.
potentially, um, but haven't quite made that jump yet. But I've had a lot of success with the CGM, and I really like my CGM.
Yeah, yeah, and
So
it's good to hear that it hasn't, gotten in the way
yeah,
of your activities or
it
anything
really
like that. I
hasn't.
think
No.
there's
Yeah.
the concern. I can definitely see why it's a concern, especially with
Yeah.
something, as physically intense as jujitsu, where there's a
Yeah.
lot of contact, a lot of rolling
Mhm.
around the floor and stuff like
I wear
that.
I wear one on my arm now, and I
Yeah,
have a little brace that I use to kinda cover it. Um, you know, unfortunately, technology isn't perfect. It's a convenience, and it's really helpful, but it's not perfect. So, I'm always
yeah,
fearful to get it knocked off because unfortunately insurance doesn't,
right,
they don't cover those that necessarily that get, knocked off in physical
right.
activity or whatever. So, um, but for the most part, it hasn't been an issue. But jujitsu's been great at helping me process like all the stuff that you deal with, like the mental
Mhm.
stress, great physical, everything. So, um, yeah, really
How
good.
about, like, dealing with lows or things like that? Like, are the guys that you practice with aware
Hmm.
of your diabetes
Yes.
and know how to help
Yeah.
you?
Yep. They are. Yep. And it's never a problem. I mean, if I start to feel any hypoglycemia come on, I'll just take a break, sit out, you know.
Yeah.
But um, actually, I just met a kid, a young man, 15, 16 the other day. He's kind of new to our gym. He's a wrestler. He does high school wrestling, and it's so awesome. Like he wears a pump, and so um, one day I came into the gym and I introduced myself, and he was he looked kind of pale, and he was slurping down some sugar,
Yep.
and he made a comment, and I said, so it was just it's cool to meet other guys and girls that are not letting diabetes get in their way from
Mhm.
competing in wrestling, jiu-jitsu, any sports, you know. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah,
I bet it made him feel good to know that there's, at least one other person with
oh
diabetes
yeah,
in the scene that knows what he's dealing with, so that's
right,
great.
yeah, it was cool. Like we immediately, you know how it is. You see somebody out
Yeah.
in the world, and you immediately have a bond.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
So one of the things, that you mentioned when we initially talked prior to
Hmm.
record was, you had aspirations of serving in the military,
Yeah.
uh, became of age, and
Right.
that didn't work out so good because of your
No.
diabetes, but you
Right.
were able to transition that into law enforcement. Let's
Hmm.
talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. That's been an interesting. So, um, when I was 18, 19, I checked with every single branch of the military, and I had already heard that they didn't allow people with type 1 in. Um, so I checked with every single branch and got turned down for reserves for anything have to do with the military. So that was pretty crappy. Just, my father's a Vietnam veteran. My cousins have all served. My
Mhm.
grandparents served. My aunt was killed in the military. Um, so that took away um, a very viable path for me,
Yeah.
and something that would have been a real natural fit, I think. Um, so you know, life goes on, and I went on about my business, and um, pursued other things. And so, um, I hope, I understand why the military doesn't want people with type 1. And I know there's exceptions. I actually know of a few people who were able to serve,
Mhm.
who were already in the military when they got diagnosed, and then were able to, I guess, successfully show that they could keep doing what they were doing with type
Sure.
1. So I get why, we would be seen as probably a liability to the military, but, you know, um, I hope that someday, as technology continues to improve, that's something that people with type 1 can do, because,
Yeah.
we can pretty much do whatever we want now. So, you know, uh, if you're with the US government and you're watching this video and you're starting to recruiting, it's time to make a change.
Yeah.
Um, so to get into law enforcement, um, I was 35 when I got into the academy, so I was a little bit older. Um, but so that to be able to be in the law enforcement academy, like, that was really never to be a police officer is something a lot of people think about, and it's something I thought about, but I never really gave it any serious thought until
Yeah.
that opportunity presented itself when I came back home from JDRF. And I'll never forget how great it felt. Like the first couple days of academy, I was looking around and I like got goosebumps, because I
Yeah.
knew that this was exactly where I needed to be, and this was the experience that I missed out on, with the military. And so, like, I am extremely appreciative that I've gotten to be a law enforcement officer. It's been 8, coming up on 9 years, I guess, that I've been a law enforcement officer. And again, I just feel really, really, really lucky to been able to serve in that role.
Yeah.
Um, so I was talking to my wife this morning, like, about coming on your show. Like, if I can inspire one person with type 1
Mhm.
to go into law enforcement um, as a career, then that's a success. Then I've done a good thing. And that was one of the big reasons why I wanted to talk, is to hopefully inspire people. If you have a draw towards the military or service of some type, like, it's totally doable. And because when I was 14, there wasn't a lot of those I didn't know of any people really that were
Right.
diabetic, and I certainly didn't know any people that were in the military or cops or
Yeah.
anything. So, that's a definitely good option for people with type 1. I actually know quite a few type 1 officers or officers with type 1.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah.
And how did your diabetes, were there extra hoops you had to jump through or
Yeah.
ways that you had to
Yep.
kind of show
Yeah.
your
Mhm.
department that
Yeah.
diabetes wouldn't be a
Yep.
problem for you?
Yeah, so the physical to get on with the city, was I definitely this was like 8 or 9 years ago. I had to bring in handwritten, logs, glucose logs to show that
Mhm.
I had good sensitivity of when a low blood sugar was coming on. They wanted to see that I had control. They wanted to see that I was physically healthy. So I definitely had to jump through some hoops. Um, but as long as you're taking care of yourself and as long as you're responsible and can demonstrate that you know what you're doing. You're not going to put, your employer in any bad position by,
Mhm.
not staying on top of your blood sugars, then you should be good to go.
Yeah. And what about fellow officers? Did they, you also have to earn their trust, right? Because 'Cause you're out
Yeah,
there and
for sure.
you're
Yeah.
protecting them and vice
Hmm.
versa.
Right.
Um,
It's
yeah, I imagine
never
there
been an issue.
yeah. What
Yeah.
about, have you ever
And
encountered a diabetes situation out
I was
there?
going to say, yeah, I was going to say, I can honestly say that there has been maybe 2 times in my career where we were running to a call or I was responding to something and I was on the verge of having a low blood sugar, but
Mhm.
I was like actively treating it. There's been a number of
Yeah,
times where I was actively treating my blood sugar, on the way to a call for service.
sure.
Just because I knew either that it was going to go low or that it was going low, but it's never been an issue. I've been fortunate in my, you know, like I said, almost 30 years with diabetes that I have not gone into, um, I've not lost consciousness. I've never happened to been hospitalized for hyperglycemia.
Yeah,
Um, so I've pretty diligently managed it. It's not to say that even if you diligently manage your diabetes that you won't have an issue because it happens.
sure.
But I've been
Yeah,
really fortunate that I haven't had an issue. It hasn't been an issue for me. And we have regular physicals, and it's not a problem.
yeah. That's really good to hear.
Yeah.
Have you
It's
ever
challenging, but it's no problem. Go ahead.
Yeah, of course, of course. Have you ever, encountered someone out in the field that had diabetes
Yes.
and needed help? And in that case,
Yeah.
imagine it was helpful for you to understand a little.
Definitely. Yes, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. I've had people in custody that I recognized it.
Mhm.
Um, I've seen I've seen people with really high blood sugar. I've seen people really low blood sugar. Um, yeah, so it comes in handy for sure because you can recognize those symptoms. Or if you have to go handle a call and you know that the person that you're going to is experiencing symptoms of a low blood sugar or whatever, you
Mhm.
can go in there with just that much more knowledge,
Right.
and and also you can help other officers, um,
Yeah.
recognize kind of what's going on
I
um,
think that would be such a help. One of my, I don't know, I call it an irrational fear, but
mhm,
I actually think it's quite rational, is that
yeah,
I might be out in public experiencing a low blood sugar and
right.
kinda lose control of my senses, my
Mhm,
wits,
right,
and become combative, and in
right,
that case,
yep,
there's a
yeah,
danger
right.
of
Oh,
this, right?
very much so. Yeah. No, that's totally rational. You know, um, guess we have to keep advocating and keep educating and, um, you know, it's sometimes surprising though still how little people know
Right.
about diabetes. First responders, medics and everybody, law enforcement, medics, fire, they all are a lot more familiar with it, but like, you know, there's still a lot of knowledge that there's still a lot of education that needs to happen that
Yeah.
that that people aren't getting, like, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. So you
Yeah.
mentioned uh, um, recently about kind of bumping into another autoimmune
Yeah.
diagnosis.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that, how that affected
Yeah.
your law enforcement career,
Yeah.
how it
Yeah.
affected your
Yeah.
parenting, your
Yep.
daughter was young and diabetes and all that. A
Yep.
a big thing to deal with.
Yeah. So last year, so so I was with the city for 3 years, and then I transitioned to, um, a county law enforcement agency, and, I ended up over the course of my time there, over the course of after, I guess, 2 or 3 years, I found myself, moving up in the agency, and then I was actually ended up being in charge for the last couple of years. And so, um, I had a lot of stress just, you know, running an agency and being
Yeah.
responsible for, I think there was 15 or 16 officers, under my
Hmm.
command. And so I started to have like really low energy. Um, Looking back, like my skin had become uh, very dark. Like I'm naturally kind of darker complected, but like I looked really dark,
Right.
um, and like really having some serious energy issues. Like also confusion, brain fog, things like that.
Yeah.
So, long story short, we tried to figure out what was going on, and they diagnosed me with anemia first, and so I started supplementing with iron, but that didn't quite fix it. So actually, a pediatric endocrinologist friend of ours um, was actually in the office where my wife works, and um, he was asking about me. We knew each other from when I was a personal trainer, and she's actually, long story short, she was telling him that I had been kind of sick and what was going on, and he was the one that said we need to get him tested for Addison's disease.
Mm.
Um, so got some blood work done, and then they came back with a diagnosis at Addison's disease or primary adrenal insufficiency, PAI for
Okay.
short. So I guess this is January
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
24. This is September of 23,
Okay.
22. September of 20. So it's been over a year.
Mm.
And um so yeah, they tested got so I have to take hydrocortisone every day. My adrenal glands, which are on my kidneys, no longer produce, I guess, cortisol.
Okay.
I think I'm
Yeah.
saying that right. Um, but so yeah, it's another autoimmune. Um, it it You can go into what's called an adrenal crisis because my adrenal glands aren't working properly anymore, um, and your body's not producing cortisone or cortisol, I guess, to deal with stress. If you have a very stressful event, you can go into what's called adrenal crisis, which is a really not a good condition, and it's actually potentially fatal. So,
Wow. Yeah.
just like people with type 1 need to have some type of emergency glucose or a glucagon kit handy
Mhm.
to treat a severe low or to have somebody that you're with
Yep.
treat you with that, um, people with Addison's need to kind of have handy a shot of cortisol. So,
Okay.
if I was to have an extremely stressful event, um, I would immediately have to updose with hydrocortisone orally, but also I may have to inject
Yeah.
to avoid an adrenal crisis. I haven't had to go into that yet. When I was initially diagnosed, I was in pretty bad shape and I didn't quite realize. It's kind of like when I got diagnosed with diabetes, like I had been symptomatic for months, but we didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
Um, and so just like with that, with Addison's, as soon as I started taking hydrocortisone, I was immediately feeling better. I haven't had an adrenal crisis, but I we're friends on Facebook, and I shared
Mhm.
some of that on Facebook, and like I essentially called it quits to my law enforcement career because I thought it was over. I thought, well,
Yeah.
I'm already in a stressful position at the head of an agency.
Yeah.
Um, and now I'm gonna, well, with what I knew then, I thought, well, stress and law enforcement go hand in hand. So I'm gonna hang it up. Um, so long story short, I got out of law enforcement for a number of months, and then I found my way back in a few months ago, and so I feel really, really grateful to be back, even though, you know, um, law enforcement is not to get sidetracked, but it's a really, there's a lot of pressure on officers,
Absolutely.
nowadays, um, and for good reason. And some of it uh, is I think just lack of understanding, on people who've never done law enforcement because, so anyway, it's proven to not be an issue, Scott, for me to remain in law enforcement. And, again, with my physical, with getting on with the agency, I had to show like it wasn't a problem. I had to
Yep.
get blood work done. So, um, like I
I
said,
mean,
I'm
I can
stubborn.
only imagine how hard it was for you to have to, to say, "Hey, this maybe not,"
Yeah.
and as something
Yeah.
that, you had, childhood dreams of serving
Yep.
and
Right.
there, and
Yeah.
you're like, "Wow," and then you have to call it
Yep.
quits. That
Yep.
must be hard.
Yeah, it's been rough trying to get back on my feet again, post Addison's diagnosis. But now I am in a good place again, and I just feel, again, just so grateful that I get to be in this role. Um, like, it just feels very natural to me. I like helping people. I like, um, like I'm decent at responding to situations that are less than ideal.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
just to be honest, I attribute some of that to just having to take on ownership of type 1 diabetes at
Sure.
14.
Mhm.
It's like it teaches you, one of the upsides to living with autoimmune illness and getting diagnosed at a young age, or the age of 14 anyway, is it taught me, you know, like you kind of have to toughen up.
Mm.
You have to overcome odds every
Yeah,
day. You have to, you're up against the wall.
yeah.
So, like, you build that fortitude through adversity, and,
Mhm.
like, in law enforcement, it's adversity all day, every day, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah. So in
Yeah,
in a
that
in
makes
a way, this is God's purpose for me,
Mhm.
to I just feel so grateful to be in a position to
Yeah.
be able to serve and be in this role, like,
Yeah. It's
so.
funny kind of looking back on things and kind of seeing that divine path that
Mm,
weaves its way through. Diabetes is
yeah.
one great example of life not being fair, but
Mhm.
what are you gonna do with that? Are you gonna curl up into a ball and just hide away from it, or are you gonna do what
Exactly.
you do and still pursue
Yeah,
dreams?
100%. You know, and diabetes is gonna beat you down, like, it's gonna beat you down, but what are you gonna do? You gotta keep getting back up. So it makes
Yeah.
us, you know, to survive and to thrive with type 1 is a mission. It's a freaking mission. But,
Yeah.
you know,
I kinda
yeah.
chuckle because I often I should have learned my lesson by now, but, I'll look at my information, I'll say, "You know what? Boy, I'm doing pretty good," right? And then all of a sudden, it's like my blood sugars go wild for no
Oh,
reason, and it's
yep.
like, "Oh, well, let me show you who's in control here, pal."
Oh, yeah. I know. I know. Before we got on here, I had uh, a coconut water, and I haven't had one of those for a while, but, like, it shot me up to, like,
Yeah.
freaking high, and that's, so, it's it's
It's
always there.
Yeah, you're right. So,
Yeah.
when you mention your treatment for Addison's, you're taking
Yeah.
steroids, right? And
Exactly.
steroids for many of us with diabetes often terrify us, right? Like we hear
Right.
all stories of
Yeah.
someone going in to get an injection of steroids
Yeah.
for injury or
Right.
something else, and it
Yep.
completely messes with their blood sugar
Yeah.
for a long time. What
Right.
have you had any trouble with that or
Yeah. It's honestly, for me, it hasn't been a big deal.
mm,
You know, I haven't noticed a big change on my blood sugar and stuff. When I first got diagnosed with Addison's, that was an immediate concern. I'm like, "Oh, crap." Like, what kind of wrench is this gonna throw in?
right?
But so far it hasn't I haven't noticed. Maybe I'm just oblivious, but I'm pretty mindful of, like, I'm always watching my blood sugars and stuff.
Yeah,
So far it hasn't been an issue. And now if I have to take a shot of the emergency, that may send
sure.
me off to Neptune. I don't know.
Yeah, but in that case, you've got other problems you're dealing with to get you back where you need to be. So it's
Yeah.
yeah, that's good to hear. It's
Mhm.
I can't imagine also you're managing diabetes, but then all of a sudden you have to learn all about this other
Right.
condition. And you're also parenting with diabetes
Yeah.
and
Yep.
all, right? So your
Yeah.
daughter is 3-ish, I
Yeah.
think you said,
Yep.
and
She's
so
3. Yep.
she would have been, a little over what, 1.5 or something in the mid
Yeah.
diagnosis. And
Yeah.
it's been a long time for
Scary
me.
time.
I had little ones, that age running around, but
Yeah.
that's a lot of energy in itself. So I
Oh,
can see
yeah.
how you would easily write off feeling tired to just being a
Oh,
new.
right. Oh, yeah. Yeah, getting worn down from work or getting worn down from, being a parent.
Mhm.
Um, but, yeah, and yeah, um, I was gonna say, like, getting, uh getting another autoimmune condition, like, having type 1 and being a parent, like, it kinda adds to me a little bit more importance of, like, being a good father,
Mhm.
being a good husband, um, just because now you're dealt with this thing in your lives that that may ultimately cut your life short,
Mhm.
potentially, like, I'm gonna do everything I can to not have a life cut short by diabetes, but immediately there adds, a diagnosis like type 1 adds for me, it added kind of an immediacy to my life, like,
Yeah.
now I need to make sure that I'm taking care of my health, that I'm being the best that I can in all aspects of my life. And so
Yeah.
now with Addison's, again, it's like, that was hard at home, my wife didn't know
Yeah.
what was going on, we're working, trying to raise a kid, and it added a lot of challenge. But so now with Addison's in the mix too, and just trying to figure out what that means and how that's going to impact our lives, like, that has added another degree of, like, okay, you need to
Mhm.
you need to do the best you can, um, with the time you've got, kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I
Yeah.
think it also adds, I know at least for me, when my kids were young, it added a lot of, um, I would say responsibility, but that doesn't quite feel like the right word. But,
Mhm.
example, you're driving your kids around and
Mhm.
like if you have some kind of, emergency situation with your kids, that's
Yeah.
scary, right?
That's
So
yeah.
it's a matter of like, um, just really trying your best to make sure. I also can remember, and my kids were really great with this, but my diabetes interrupting plans that we had. Very
Yeah.
specifically remember we wanted to go
Yeah.
out on a walk or a hike and
Yeah.
we drive to the nature park and we get out of the
Mhm.
car, start walking 10 minutes down the road. I'm low and I'd used up all my glucose tabs earlier in the day or whatever the case
Yeah.
may be, and it's like, "Hey, sorry kids, but we gotta turn around and
Right.
get back to the car where I've got more stuff."
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
and so it's a bummer in that way, but,
Yeah.
kids and I think many kids who grow up around with diabetes in their life, they're very
Mhm.
under.
Yeah, we use the term, for like glucose, or even if I have to eat some some sugar or,
Mhm.
candy or something. Everything, to my 3-year-old is daddy's medicine, is daddy's medicine,
Yeah.
is daddy's medicine. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, it rears its head sometimes in the most inconvenient times, and it can be incredibly frustrating, you know?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
like, "Really? Like, really, diabetes?
Right now? Yeah, come on.
Yeah, like, really?"
It's funny. But I
Yeah.
think also it gives us opportunities to teach our kids about dealing with adversity
Yeah.
and showing and growing resilience and that type of thing
Mhm.
too, as you
Yeah.
mentioned earlier.
Yeah, it sure does. And you have
Yeah.
to really be careful, like, to not, because it can be really maddening sometimes. So, like, with
Yeah.
those little eyes watching, you can't just go off the handle if you can help it.
Right.
Um, you know, you have to turn and face your problems.
Mhm.
That's an analogy we use in jujitsu, like,
Mm.
and so it's become kind of a
A mantra of
saying for life,
sorts.
a mantra. Yeah, for sure. Speaking of mantra, I became when I moved to New York City for JDRF, through a through a through kind of a funny way, I ended up taking some yoga training.
Yeah.
So I was a certified personal trainer, but then I took a 200-hour yoga certification, and I kept going. I ended up getting a 500-hour certification
Wonderful.
when I lived in New York City. But I say that only, like, learning learning yoga and learning kind of some of those teachings has really helped me navigate life as well.
Mm.
Um, so I didn't really ever want to be a yoga teacher. A good friend of mine was teaching the course, and she encouraged me to do it. I'm really glad she did because I learned a lot about how to live life, like,
Yeah.
she used to say, live your yoga on and off the mat. So, like,
Mhm.
I applied those principles into life as well. But,
Yeah, I bet. I've always had I've had a semi interest in learning yoga,
yeah.
mostly because of basketball. There was
Oh,
play I would go play at the YMCA back in the Twin Cities, and there was this guy there, Tony, and he was really good, right? And then he disappeared for 2 months, and when he came back, he was even better. And so all of us was going like, "Holy cow, Tony, like, where were you? What did you do?" And he remember why he left, but in the while
yeah.
he was gone, he
Yep.
started doing yoga, and it
Yeah.
was incredible to
Yeah.
see the difference that it made
Oh,
in,
yeah.
like, core strength and
Oh, yeah.
maneuverability and stuff like that, and I always think of that. My challenge has been that whenever I try getting started with yoga,
Mhm.
it's surprisingly difficult. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
there
Oh,
it's a
yeah.
lot.
Oh, it for sure is. I I I I have a very short attention span, so, like, I've always been terrible about going to class or doing anything,
Yeah.
that requires a lot of attention, unfortunately. Um, but, like, I'll find time to just kinda sit and stretch on the floor watching TV, and,
Mhm.
um, even that for me has had a lot of benefit, just helping me kind of, like, process, again, some of the emotions, the feelings, the kind of the difficulties that come with managing
Yeah.
autoimmune stuff. So, uh, you don't have to be a yogi or be able to stand on your big toe, but,
Yeah.
if you
I don't
can,
have to take 500
find
hours of
but yeah, 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 yeah. No, if you can find time to just kind of, like, process your thoughts, spend some time, you know,
Mhm.
um, dealing with some of those emotions, because if you don't, they kinda build up and
Yeah.
can kinda manifest themselves into, you know, things that aren't gonna serve you very well.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
And
Wise advice.
when I was in New York City and I lived in Jersey and I didn't really know a lot of people, that was really helpful for me then because, um, you know, New York City's wild and crazy and busy, and, um, I went there, didn't know anybody.
Mhm.
Um, so it was a good tool to help me kind of, um, get through my time there, so to speak.
Yeah.
But, walking down, Broadway to our office, to JDF headquarters every day past Wall Street, it was a good experience, professionally and just personally. Um, yeah. So,
Yeah. It sounds like,
I hope you do, more of these, Scott. You've always ever since I met you at CWD, I was always so excited to meet you, and you're just a great advocate for diabetes, and you're an
I,
awesome voice, and just have always been so respectful to me and everybody that I've seen you talk with. People just, I hope you do more of these. I know you're kind of in a
thank you.
transition phase right now, right?
Yeah. It's fun. I think one of
Yeah,
the big things that, one of the big things that social media and all that we've done through that has done for me has been, I think really two things. One, a sense of normalcy, right? So,
yeah,
diabetes, it's really easy to get in this negative headspace where
for sure.
you're doing all the right things and you're maybe are struggling with, whatever it is you're struggling with. And you
Sure.
think, and I must be really bad at this. But social media and connecting with other people with diabetes, it taught me that no, it's not me being bad at something. This is like many people with diabetes struggle
Yeah.
with this, right? So it gave me a
Mhm.
sense of normalcy, which then in turn gave me the strength and resilience to just keep on working and pushing
Yep,
hard. The other
yep.
thing it added was many different perspectives on approaching those things that I struggle with or other problems and learning how, other people are dealing with it
Yep.
to maybe experiment and try those
Yeah,
for myself. So I love
absolutely.
stories and sharing stories. I think it's
Oh,
really
yeah. Yeah, that's good. You're right. It's essential, and it is a blessing to be able to talk and have that connectedness. Um, I I need to probably be a little bit better about trying to find opportunities in person, because I love to just be around people and connect in person. But yeah, yeah, that stuff wasn't around back in the day, and,
right.
to be able to get online and to share some of those and to see other people having the same experiences and, like, frustrations with, healthcare and,
Yeah.
it does, it makes a big difference. It really does.
Yeah. I think it's good to know that it's out there. Right now you're in a different season of life with a toddler running around and
Oh, yeah.
that
Yeah.
takes a lot of time and energy. But
Yeah.
the nice thing about all this is that it'll be there when that season changes, and uh,
Mhm.
it
Yeah.
you can tap into it as it best fits your needs and your schedule. So it's
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah. Well, we've talked about an awful lot of things, but is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you wanna bring up?
Hmm. I don't think so. I can't really think of anything. Again, I just if I when I was 14 and, like, I remember hearing about the first time I heard about somebody who was like a soccer referee at the time or something.
Yeah.
I played soccer as a kid, and I remember hearing like, "Oh, so and so has type 1," and I was, like,
Mhm.
blown away. Um, so with social media and stuff now, you can find people a lot easier. Gosh, I mean, there's so many people who've done so many extraordinary things with type 1. Um, but if I can if I can inspire, like, there wasn't anybody that I could, like, look up to necessarily in type
Yeah.
with type 1 for a lot of years.
Mhm.
Um, so if you're watching this and you have a desire to serve, even though the military is probably not gonna be an option for you, it's because as of right now, you'll still get turned down. Um, go and find a position with the law enforcement agency in some capacity and fulfill that service role. Um, so yeah, if I can inspire one person to do that who is maybe newly diagnosed, then that's all I want to do. Like, great,
Yeah. I
you
think
know,
you've got a very powerful story um, I think what probably feels somewhat just normal everyday life for you, right? Serving in your law enforcement,
hmm
black belt in jiu-jitsu and like there's
yeah,
so many things you've got going on, Andy, that just your story, it's powerful testimony to what people can accomplish living with diabetes and Addison's and
Yeah.
parenting with diabetes
Yeah.
and the whole mix. So thank you
Thanks, man.
for
Well, I really
being
appreciate
part.
it. I thank you. It's been awesome catching up with you and
Yeah,
just seeing everything you're involved in. Uh,
yeah, absolutely. What's next? What's next for you? What are you looking at?
mm, uh, I just want to just keep taking care of myself. Watching my kid grow. Um,
Yeah,
she's she's amazing and probably the best thing that's ever happened to me. Um, yeah, just being as healthy as I can and trying to be the best officer I can, and
yeah,
yeah, just taking a trip in May. Looking forward to
nice.
that.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Yep.
good. It sounds like
Yeah.
a full and busy and fulfilling life. So that's
Yeah.
wonderful.
Doing the best I can.
Absolutely. All right. Well, let's wrap this up. And
Okay.
everyone, thank you for watching. Andy, thanks again for coming on
Thanks,
and
Scott.
sharing your
It's always
story.
great to see you, man. It's always
Yeah,
great to see you, buddy.
we'll get you back on again soon.
Let's do it. All right. Keep
All right.
charging on. See you, man.